Tonight, you can set the day down. In this quiet corner of the old world, there is nothing to do but follow the light, the room, and the small work of ordinary lives. The cold comes in through the walls before it comes through the door. You feel it first in your hands, the faint sting at the tips of your fingers, the dry tightness along the knuckles where the skin has cracked from months of cold water and rough flour. You press your palms together for a moment near the glow of the charcoal brazier, let the warmth spread slowly through the joints, and then you go back to work. It is the last month of the year, the deep cold of midwinter, and outside, the snow is falling again on the wide cobblestone avenue of the old capital. The flakes drift down in slow, pale curtains through the lantern light, settling on the eaves and the cobblestones and the shoulders of the few people still moving through the dark. The wind lifts and carries the snow sideways in long, cold gusts, sweeping down the wide avenue, sliding under doors and felt curtains, and into every crack in every wall. But inside your wonton shop, the fire is burning strong. The large black clay soup pot sits on the front stove, and the broth inside it is moving gently, not boiling hard, just a slow, quiet simmer, breathing out a steady curl of pale steam that rises and spreads across the low ceiling of the shop. The smell of it fills the room completely, deep and savory and warm, rich with the goodness of pork marrow bones and chicken frames that have been simmering since before the sky was light. It is the smell of a place that has been doing the same thing for a very long time. It is a smell that people recognize from halfway down the street. The orange glow of the lantern outside your door filters in through the heavy felt curtain that hangs across the entrance. It falls in soft, warm bands across the old elm work table, across the white porcelain jars with their careful lids, across the bamboo trays stacked in a neat row at the edge of the bench. The light is gentle and still. Everything in the shop seems to breathe slowly in it. This is the Zhang family wonton shop. You took it over from your father, and this year marks 30 years since that day. You were 13 years old when you first stood on a low wooden stool beside your father and watched his hands move the quick press of the thumb, the turn of the wrapper, the neat pinch that sealed each little parcel of filling into a smooth, plump shape. You watched, and then you tried. You tried, and then you learned. And somewhere in those early years, without quite noticing it happen, the movements passed from his hands into yours. Now your temples carry threads of silver, and the skin of your fingertips has been worn down to a thick, roughened callus by 3 decades of rolling and folding and pinching. The corners of your eyes carry the lines of 10,000 early mornings. But your hands still know exactly what to do. The work table is made from old elm wood, and it has been beside you for all 30 of those years. Its surface has been worn to a deep, smooth shine by the steady pressure of palms and dough and bamboo boards. The grain of the wood has absorbed so much flour and meat and oil over the years that even when the table is clean, it still holds a faint, round smell of fermented grain and savory fat, the smell of long use, of a craft repeated 10,000 times. The table is divided informally into 2 halves, the left side for rolling the wrappers, the right side for for mixing the filling and assembling the wontons. Along the edges sit the bamboo trays and thin bamboo boards, washed and stacked. Beside them stand several white porcelain jars, all sealed with lids to keep out the cold air and the dust, each one holding something specific: sea salt, rice vinegar, finely minced ginger, ground pepper brought in by overseas traders by sea, the kind that sends a hot wave through your chest when you eat it, the kind that drives out cold the way nothing else quite does. Everything is in its place. Nothing is out of order. It has been this way for 30 years. Every morning before dawn, while the city is still submerged in the deep black quiet of night, and while the only sound is the distant, muffled toll of the bell tower somewhere across the rooftops, you rise. The first thing you do is go to the back kitchen. The pork leg bones and chicken carcasses have been soaking in cold water since the night before. You lift them out, crack the joints with a heavy blow, and place them into the large black clay pot. You fill the pot with clear, sweet well water drawn from the local well. Linen's well water has always been clean and slightly sweet, and you have never used anything else. Then you set the charcoal underneath and bring the whole pot to a full rolling boil over a strong flame. Foam rises to the surface, gray and cloudy. You skim it away carefully with the ladle, every bit of it, until the broth is clear. Then you lower the flame to the smallest flicker and set the lid in place. This broth is the soul of the wontons. Your father taught you that, and you have never allowed yourself to forget it. The pot must simmer for at least 3 full hours. The bones must give up everything they have, all the collagen, all the marrow fat, all the deep mineral richness that lives inside them, until the broth thickens to something almost creamy, pale and full-bodied like warmed milk, with a fragrance that seems to come up from somewhere very deep. Only then is it ready. Only then can it serve as the base of a bowl of wontons worth eating on a cold winter's night. During the day, when the shop is busy, you move the pot to the front stove and keep it warm over a gentle, steady flame, never a hard boil, which would cloud the broth and evaporate away all its careful richness. In the last month of the year, when the shop stays open through the night, you put on a second pot in the afternoon so that there is always fresh broth ready for the evening and the late-night guests. Every customer who comes through the felt curtain after dark, no matter how late, drinks a clear, full-flavored broth that has not been stewed thin or boiled into murkiness. That is the standard. It does not change. With the broth settled and simmering, you turn to the flour. The fine white flour you use comes from a grain merchant on the north side of the city winter wheat, brought up from the Huainan region to the south, milled 3 times, and passed through fine sieves until every last trace of bran has been removed. The flour that comes out is as white as pear blossoms in early spring, and has a strong natural elasticity that holds up well in hot broth without dissolving or going soft. In winter, the cold air makes dough stiffer and slower to develop, so you mix your wrappers with 3 things only: warm water that is comfortable to the touch, not hot, not cold, a small pinch of sea salt, and the whites of eggs from your own free-range hens. These 3 things together produce a dough with real strength. thin enough to be almost translucent when rolled, but sturdy enough to survive the boil without tearing, and light enough that when it comes out of the soup, it still tastes of wheat rather than just of broth. You work the dough steadily, pressing and folding and pressing again, until the surface is perfectly smooth and yields with a soft, even resistance. Under your palm, no lumps, no dry patches, no sticky spots. Then you wrap the ball tightly in a clean, damp cloth and set it aside to rest. Resting the dough is not something you can rush in winter. The cold slows everything down. The dough needs at least an hour and a half to fully relax for the gluten to loosen and settle so that when you roll it out, it does not spring back, and when you fold it around the filling, the edges seal cleanly without cracking. You have learned this patience over 30 years. The dough is ready when it is ready, not before. You mix the dough in 3 separate batches. The first batch is for the early morning customers. The second and third batches come together in the afternoon for the evening trade and the long night ahead. Dough that sits too long loses its fresh quality, the texture changes, the taste flattens slightly. So you always start fresh, in stages, timed to the rhythm of the day. While the dough rests, you begin the fillings. The smell reaches you before you lift the first lid. Raw pork still cool from the morning delivery, earthy mushroom soaking in warm water, the clean green bite of freshly blanched bamboo shoots. 4 large ceramic bowls sit in a row along the right side of the elm work table, each one holding a different filling, each one the result of 30 years of making the same thing until it cannot be made better. You never chased after showy new fillings or fashionable variations. You settled on these 4 a long time ago, and you have made them the same way, with the same ingredients, to the same standard, every single day since. That steadiness is itself a kind of skill. Regulars do not come back because you surprised them. They come back because you never disappointed them. In the last month of the year, the cold helps fillings stay fresh longer in the chill air. Even so, you prepare only enough for half a day at a time. The pork filling, especially, once it has been made up for a while, you throw out what is left and mix a fresh batch rather than let it sit. A bowl of wontons costs very little. The filling must still be at its best. The first bowl, and the one that empties fastest every single day, holds the fresh pork filling. The meat arrives every morning before the sky has fully lightened, delivered by the butcher from the shop at the end of the alley. He brings fresh front leg pork from pigs, killed that same morning, about 30% fat and 70% lean, and he never sends yesterday's meat. You would know if he did. You have been handling raw pork for 30 years, and you can tell the difference the moment you press your fingers into it. Winter pork is especially good, fattened over a full year, the flesh close-grained and tender, even in the coldest weeks of midwinter, and the supply never ran short. Winter pigs are especially good, fattened over a full year, the flesh close-grained and tender, the fat accumulated slowly. The front leg has been used constantly by the animal, which means the muscle fibers are tight and full of flavor. Minced fine. It produces a filling that is neither dry nor greasy, with a satisfying resistance when you bite into it and a clean, full taste that lingers. Every day, you chop the pork yourself. You start by trimming the meat completely skin removed, sinew and white connective tissue cut away, everything clean. Then you separate the fat from the lean and chop them differently. The lean meat chopped down to a fine, smooth paste, the fat cut into very small cubes. You keep them distinct, and then mix them back together, because this combination gives the filling a texture that ground meat alone can never achieve. Not just a paste, not just chunks, but something with dimension, something that feels alive when you bite it. Once the meat is the right consistency, you add it to a bowl and work in the liquid in 3 additions: warm water that has been infused with fresh ginger, combined with a small splash of rice wine to cut the rawness. Only a small pinch of sea salt for seasoning. Then you pick up a pair of bamboo chopsticks and stir in one continuous direction, always the same direction, without stopping, until the filling becomes smooth and cohesive and slightly springy, until it pulls away from the sides of the bowl cleanly and holds together when you pinch a piece of it. This is the point at which the filling has developed its proper texture. The wontons made from it will hold their juice through the boiling and release a small, savory burst when bitten into. That is the taste people have been coming back for 30 years. The second bowl holds the pork and winter bamboo shoot filling. Every morning, farmers from the Tianmu Mountains outside the city come into Linan, carrying freshly dug winter bamboo shoots on shoulder poles. You have an arrangement with one of them, a steady, reliable man you have dealt with for years. He brings you 5 caddies of shoots every day, no more. You take only the tips, the youngest and most tender section, and give the rest of the shoot to neighbors along the alley. You never hold bamboo shoots overnight. The freshness is the entire point. The shoots you peel are white and clean, with a mild, faintly grassy smell and a crispness that you can feel when you press your thumbnail into the flesh. You blanch them first in a pot of boiling water, which softens the slight bitterness and sets the clean flavor. Then cut them into small, uniform cubes. These go directly into a portion of the prepared pork filling and are folded through until evenly distributed. The combination is light and clean. The savory richness of the pork balanced and lifted by the fresh snap of the bamboo shoots. It is not a heavy filling. It does not coat the mouth or leave you feeling full in a tired way. It is the kind of thing that scholars and older customers with gentle palates tend to favor, satisfying without being overwhelming, delicate without being thin. The third bowl holds the vegetarian filling. In this era, many people in Linan followed Buddhist practice, and the last month of the year brought a particular intensification of devotion. Lay worshippers observing a vegetarian religious diet, elderly neighbors who had given up meat, monks and devotees from nearby temples, all of them knew your vegetarian wontons. You had a small but steady stream of customers who came specifically for this bowl. You do not make the vegetarian filling complicated. You have never needed to. The ingredients are 4: dried shiitake mushrooms from the mountains to the south, firm tofu from the old woman who runs the tofu shop at the end of the alley, wood ear mushrooms, and a small amount of diced winter bamboo shoot for freshness and texture. That is all. The dried shiitake mushrooms are soaked in warm water until fully softened, then wrung out completely and chopped fine. Their smell after soaking is intensely savory, earthy, and deep in a way that is hard to describe but immediately recognizable. The firm tofu made with brine, dense and full of its own mild flavor, is wrapped tightly in a layer of cloth and pressed to remove as much water as possible before chopping. Wet tofu left in a wonton filling will seep through the wrapper and cause it to tear in the pot. Dry tofu holds its shape, seasons evenly, and gives the filling a soft, grainy body that contrasts well with the other textures. The wood ear mushrooms, also soaked and rehydrated, are chopped into small pieces and added for their clean, slightly gelatinous crunch. At the end, you scatter in a small amount of toasted white sesame seeds for fragrance and season the whole thing with only a little sea salt and a touch of soy sauce. The goal is to taste the ingredients themselves, the earthiness of the mushroom, the clean soy flavor of the tofu, the mineral crunch of the wood ears, not a sauce, not a seasoning. Even customers who eat meat will sometimes order a bowl of vegetarian wontons in the coldest weeks of winter. After weeks of rich, heavy food, something this clean and light can feel like a kindness to the body. The fourth bowl, a small one, kept off to the side, is reserved for certain loyal customers only. From late autumn through the end of the year, when hairy crabs from the lake region are at the peak of their season, you take a small number of advance orders for crab roe wontons. The crabs must be alive and full, the roe rich and dense. You hire a pair of older women who are skilled at breaking down crab, and they work through the crabs carefully, extracting the golden roe and the soft white crab meat with patient, practiced hands. You combine the crab with a very small amount of pork filling and finely minced ginger, just enough to support the crab, never enough to overwhelm it, because the entire purpose of this filling is the sweetness of the crab itself. Every element is in service of that. Each bowl of crab roe wontons holds 6 pieces. Nothing more. You do not prepare this filling in advance or keep it on the counter hoping for orders. Customers must place their order the day before. If no one has ordered, you do not make it. Good ingredients handled carelessly are worse than no ingredients at all, and the cost of waste would eat through any profit the crab wontons could bring. Better to do it rarely and do it properly. Along the corner of the work table, the white porcelain jars sit in a row with their lids in place. Sea salt in one, rice vinegar in another, finely minced ginger in the third, and in the last, a palm-sized bamboo tube of ground pepper brought into Linan by overseas traders by sea, the kind of spice that heats the throat and spreads warmth outward from the chest. All the shops and food stalls in the city have started using it. Customers who have been coming for years know exactly what they want. More ginger, less salt, a generous pinch of pepper over the broth. You remember every regular's preference without being asked. The broth is simmering steadily. The dough has rested through its full time and is ready. The 4 bowls of filling sit in their row. The bamboo trays are clean and waiting. You lift the heavy felt curtain away from the doorway and hang the lantern that reads Jang Family Wonton Shop just outside the entrance. The shop is open. You lift the felt curtain and the cold rushes in, and with it, the sound of the whole street already moving. Before full daylight, the wide avenue fills with the sounds of the working world beginning its day. The creak and rattle of hand carts, the rhythmic slap of shoulder poles, the sharp calls of vendors finding their positions at the market, the hollow knock of wooden wheels over paving stones, the low voices of people moving through the cold with somewhere to be. Snow still covers the rooftops and the edges of the street, but the main avenue has been trampled clear by the first hours of foot traffic. The air is sharp and dry, and every breath comes out as a small, visible cloud. The first customers through your felt curtain are vegetable farmers from the villages outside the city. They come in carrying their shoulder pole baskets, each basket piled with freshly pulled greens and white radishes, the leaves still damp with frost and dew, the roots trailing a little mud from the pre-dawn fields. These men and women have walked for hours through the dark and cold to reach the city gates before they opened, then continued straight down the avenue toward the early market. They need to secure a good selling spot before the other vendors fill the prime positions. They have no time and very little money. Most of them order the vegetarian wontons, the cheapest bowl you serve. They are farming folk, careful with every coin, accustomed to eating plainly. They sit at the nearest table with their baskets set down beside them and their frozen hands wrapped around the bowl before the bowl is even set down properly. They eat slowly, drawing out the warmth, letting the hot broth thaw the stiffness from their fingers and the ache from their feet. A bowl of wontons, eaten slowly, can warm a person for a good half-hour or more, and they know this from experience. You always fill their bowls with a little extra broth not asked for, just given. They do not mention it. You do not mention it either. When they finish, they are careful and deliberate about paying. They reach into a small cloth purse or pull a folded piece of cloth from inside their coat where they have been keeping their coins warm against their body. They count out the exact copper coins and place them flat on the table, then look up and say thank you in the quiet, straightforward way of people who mean it. Then they lift their baskets, settle the poles across their shoulders, and walk out into the cold again, moving quickly now, back to the business of the day. Close behind the farmers come the porters and cart pullers. These are bigger men, broader through the shoulders, with the particular kind of physical solidity that comes from years of hauling heavy loads. Their hand carts are piled with goods bound for delivery across the city or out through the gates before the morning traffic makes the roads slow. They have been awake half the night, and they are both cold and hungry in a way that is past discomfort and into simple, urgent need. They come through the curtain with their voices already up, not unkind, but loud, with tiredness and cold. 2 big bowls of pork wontons, lots of broth, fill them up. They drop into seats heavily, pulling off gloves or rubbing their hands together hard against the cold. You always add a few extra wontons to their bowls. They carry heavy things for a living. They need real food, not a token portion. You fill each bowl until the broth reaches the brim and the wontons sit close together just below the surface. They eat fast, and completely every wonton, every drop of broth, the bowl tipped at the end to get the last of it. Then they wipe their mouths, stack their coins on the table without counting them carefully because they already know how much it is, and head back out. The city gates will be filling up. They need to move. Also, in the early morning, servants from the large households in the neighborhood arrive carrying covered food carriers, lacquered or wooden boxes with close-fitting lids that hold heat in. These are the domestic staff of wealthy families, and they have been sent out to collect breakfast for their employers. They know what they want before they come through the door. They have been told exactly, or they have come often enough to have their own habits. One wants pork filling. Another wants the vegetarian. One asks for extra ginger, another for less salt, one for the broth to be ladled separately so it does not soak the wrappers on the walk home. You note each request and follow it. When everything is cooked and ready, you ladle the wontons carefully into the food carriers, pour the broth in last, and make sure the lid fits snugly before handing it back. By the time they arrive at the household table, the wontons will still be hot. Also, drifting in through the early morning are the neighbors who run food stalls, tea shops, and other small shops nearby. Before they open their own doors and begin their own long days, they come to you for a bowl of something hot. A wonton seller eating wontons from another shop. There is no contradiction in it. Everyone knows that cooking for other people all day is not the same as eating well yourself, and a warm meal before the rush begins makes the hours that follow more bearable. They eat quickly, leave the money without ceremony, and go back to their own preparations. By mid-morning, the sharpest intensity of the early rush has eased. The farmers are at their stalls. The cart pullers are on the road. The last of the household servants have gone home with their covered carriers. The Imperial street still hums with movement, but the frenetic edge of the dawn hour has softened into the steadier rhythm of a full morning in motion. Your wife hands you a cup of tea. You take it with both hands and hold it for a moment without drinking, just feeling the warmth pass through the ceramic into your palms. Then you drink it slowly, sitting on the low stool near the work table, and let the brief stillness settle around you. On the elm table, a dozen bamboo trays of finished wontons are already lined up, pork filling on one side, bamboo shoot and pork on another, vegetarian on the third, each tray covered lightly and set in careful order. These will carry you through the midday hours. Your hands are still moving. Even sitting down, even drinking tea, your fingers return to the wrapper and the filling without being asked. You pick up a piece of dough, press it flat with the rolling pin, add a small pinch of filling, fold, and pinch. Another one done. Set it on the tray. Pick up the next piece of dough. This is what 30 years of practice looks like from the outside, motion that has become indistinguishable from rest. When the sun reaches the middle of the sky, the midday customers begin to filter in. These are the craftsmen and artisans from the surrounding neighborhood, men who work with their hands in the old familiar trades, silversmiths, carpenters, coopers who make barrels and wooden tubs. They have been at their benches since early morning, and by midday the hunger is real, and the body needs a rest from the cold and the work. They come in twos and threes. Men who have eaten at this counter for 10 or 15 years, who know the shop the way they know their own tools, by feel, without having to think about it. They settle at a table together, order bowls of pork wontons with rice vinegar on the side, and begin eating without hurry. The soup warms them from the first swallow. The conversation starts up the way it always does. A complaint about the cold, something about a difficult job, a piece of neighborhood news. The bodies that were tight with effort and concentration slowly release. Shoulders come down, backs ease against the bench. Voices that were held quiet for hours of focused work find their natural volume again. You serve them without fuss. The wontons are ready before they have finished deciding what to order. The broth is the right temperature. The rice vinegar is on the table. This is what a meal looks like when the cook and the customer have been in the same rhythm for a long time. Nothing needs to be explained, and nothing needs to be decided. It just happens. You work through the midday hours at a steady pace, rolling, assembling, boiling, serving. Your face does not show hurry even when the tables fill. The neighborhood has a saying about you. The shopkeeper's hands are steady, and the wontons that come from those hands are steady too. People mean this as a kind of character description. They are not wrong. The afternoon comes in slowly, the light beginning to lean west, the temperature dropping again as the sun weakens. The midday customers finish and leave. The shop quiets. You sit down, stretch the stiffness from your lower back, and have a few minutes of true stillness before the evening begins. The last month of the year brings short days and long nights, and in Linnan the sun falls fast. Just past the early evening hour, the sky goes from gray to black in what feels like a single breath. The temperature drops sharply with it. The wind picks up along the Imperial Street, driving the snow in horizontal gusts that find the gaps in coats and scarves, and the worn places in the edges of shop curtains. Along the avenue, lanterns are hung out one by one, amber and warm, swaying slightly in the wind until the whole length of the street glows with a broken, shifting light that the snow scatters and multiplies into 1,000 soft halos. And then the night market opens, and the street comes alive in a completely different way. The food vendors set up their braziers. The smell of roasting chestnuts comes first, carried on the cold wind, sweet and smoky and unmistakable. Behind it comes the warm, yeasty smell of heated rice wine, and beneath that the sharp sizzle of something frying on an iron pan. The calls of the vendors stretch out in long, musical tones, each one slightly different, each one trained by years of practice to carry over the noise of the street. These sounds push in through the felt curtain in muffled waves, reminding you that the city outside is not sleeping, it is changing shifts, moving into a different kind of wakefulness. You lower the felt curtain at your entrance until only a narrow gap remains enough for a person to come through without stooping, but enough to block the steady cold that would otherwise pour in and chill the shop. You add 2 blocks of charcoal to the brazier under the broth pot, nudging the heat back up to a steady, gentle warmth. You check the level of the broth and find it still good, full, fragrant, moving slightly with a slow, rolling tremor just below a true boil. Your wife has settled onto the low stool at the corner of the work table. She is sorting through the green onions, pulling away the outer leaves, cutting them into fine rings, setting them aside in a small bowl. She works without hurrying, each motion small and even. Beside her, the stack of finished wontons on the bamboo trays is already thinning from the afternoon's customers, and she is beginning to add new ones, filling the gaps with fresh pinches of dough and filling, aligning them in the same careful rows. In the back, your hired helper, a half-grown boy from a village outside the city, quick with his hands and good-natured about hard work, is splitting the hard charcoal blocks into smaller pieces in the rear courtyard, then stacking them into the bamboo basket beside the stove. He works steadily, the sound of the splitting coming through the thin back wall in irregular bursts. The smaller pieces will be easier to manage through the night, when the fire needs adjusting in the dark, and it is better to have everything ready now than to be searching for charcoal at midnight with a crowd of cold customers waiting. The 3 of you move through the space in a rhythm that does not need words. 30 years of the same shop, the same stove, the same work, the coordination has long since passed beyond habit into something more like instinct. You each know where the others are and what they are about to need. You hand a bowl up before being asked. The charcoal basket is refilled before it runs low. The bamboo trays are replaced before they go empty. The first evening customer you recognize before the curtain fully opens. He is Lou, the owner of the cloth shop next door. He has been your neighbor for as long as you can remember, and his routine is as fixed as yours. He closes his shop, counts his accounts for the day, and then comes here. He has been doing this for almost 20 years. Tonight he smells faintly of silk and dyed fabric, the smell that lives in the walls of a cloth shop and never quite leaves the clothing of the people who work there. He walks to the table nearest the window without looking for it. His feet know the path and sits down facing the room. He raises one hand and holds up a single finger, then points at the vegetarian filling jar, then makes a small dismissive wave. You understand immediately. 1 bowl of vegetarian wontons, extra rice vinegar, no pepper, no ginger. It is the same every night. He has been keeping to vegetarian food for nearly 10 years now, a private practice that he maintains without explaining it to anyone. You take a bamboo tray from the stack, count out 20 vegetarian wontons, and carry them to the stove. The large iron pot on the front burner is at a steady rolling boil, the water turning and churning with a deep, consistent sound, the steam rising in a broad column that thins as it reaches the low ceiling. You slide the wontons in gently along the edge of the pot, one by one, then take up the slotted ladle and move it slowly across the bottom in a wide, easy arc, lifting the wontons just slightly from the surface they landed on, so they do not stick to the iron. The vegetarian wontons need care here. The wrapper is thin, and with a soft filling of tofu and mushroom, there is no firm core to resist the pressure of a rough hand. They want to be moved gently, given space, allowed to float upward on their own when they are ready. Vegetarian wontons cook faster than pork. When the water returns to a full boil and every one of them has risen to the surface, they are done. Not a moment longer, the bamboo shoots will lose their crunch, the tofu will begin to tighten and go rubbery, and the wood ear mushrooms will go soft in a way that diminishes them. The window between just right and too long is narrow, and it requires attention. You take a white ceramic bowl from the rack, ladle in half a scoop of warm broth from the second pot, the one kept just off the boil, calm and clear. Add a very small amount of salt and a spoonful of rice vinegar. Then transfer the wontons into the broth one at a time with the slotted ladle. A small scatter of finely cut green onion on top. You carry the bowl to Lou's table and set it down in front of him. He nods once. He picks up his wooden spoon. The shop goes quiet. There is the faint crackle from the charcoal in the brazier, a brief hiss when a drop of condensation falls from the lid of the broth pot onto the hot surface of the stove. Outside, the night market continues its distant, muffled commerce, a voice stretched long, calling out a price, the sound of wheels on stone, the faint clatter of someone's cart hitting a curb. But inside, the quiet is real. The curtain holds the sounds of the world at a comfortable remove. Lou eats slowly. He always has. He takes small spoonfuls and sets them down between each one. He chews without hurry. He has the manner of a man for whom this meal is not a refueling stop, but a deliberate pause, the one moment in a long working day where he does not have to be anything in particular. He sits with his bowl in both hands sometimes, just holding the warmth, not eating, simply present with it. He finishes in about half an hour. He reaches into his coin purse without fumbling. He knows the amount, always has the right coins ready, and places them on the table in a quiet row. He nods at you again. Once, the same nod as when the bowl arrived. Then he stands. He adjusts his outer coat and lifts the felt curtain. A brief gust of cold air comes through the gap, carrying a few specks of snow and the smell of the street, and then the curtain falls back into place, and he is gone, crossed the few steps back to his home next door. Not long after Lou leaves, the curtain is pushed open again, with more energy than it has seen all evening. 4 young men come in together, talking over each other, their breath clouding in the cold air they have brought in with them. They are students from one of the academies nearby, recognizable by their dress and their posture, and the particular combination of tiredness and restless energy that belongs to young men who have been studying hard and are now, briefly, free. They have been out walking the night market, probably the kind of aimless, companionable wandering that students do between sessions of work. They find a table near the door and settle into it noisily, pulling off outer layers, folding them over their knees, arranging themselves. One of them speaks for the group. 4 bowls of pork wontons, extra ginger in each. They lower their voices slightly after the order is placed, not because they mean to be polite exactly, but because the shop is calm and they feel it. You hear them talking about the provincial examinations coming in the spring, what their teacher thinks about their chances, which texts they have been memorizing. There is a mixture of bravado and genuine anxiety in the conversation. They are trying to sound more certain than they feel, the way young people do when they are frightened of something important. You cook their wontons and bring the 4 bowls to the table without comment. They eat the way young men eat when they are hungry, quickly and completely, with great appreciation and very little ceremony. The bowls empty in minutes. They pool their coins to pay, count it out once together, leave the money, and push back out into the night with their coats still half on, still talking. A trail of their energy remains in the shop for a moment after they leave the particular warmth of young people's company, loud and alive, and then it dissipates, absorbed back into the quieter, ambient heat of the room. The next customer you recognize from years ago, though now she comes in with a child of her own. She is a young woman from the lane to the east. You remember her when she was small. She used to come here with her own mother, sitting on the bench with her feet not quite reaching the floor, watching her mother eat and waiting for the bowl she would get when her mother was done. That was when you had just taken over the shop from your father, when you were still a young man yourself. Now she has a child of her own sitting beside her, a small boy, old enough to hold a spoon, but still young enough that eating is a project that requires full concentration. She orders 2 bowls of pork wontons. For her son's bowl, she asks for only a small pinch of salt and nothing else, no ginger, no pepper, no vinegar. A child's palate wants clean flavors. You cook both bowls, and when you ladle the boy's serving, you cook the wontons a little longer than you normally would, not long enough to make them fall apart, but enough to soften the skin from smooth to yielding, the way very young children prefer. You add an extra half ladle of warm broth to his bowl, clear and mild, something he can drink easily. The boy eats with terrific seriousness, holding the spoon in his fist, dipping it in with great purpose, bringing it to his mouth with the total concentration of someone for whom each spoonful is its own small achievement. Broth runs down his chin. His mother watches him with a smile she is not trying to suppress. She reaches over with a small cloth and wipes his face while he is mid-chew, and he tolerates this with the air of someone who has decided that certain inconveniences must simply be endured. You watch all of this from behind the counter and say nothing. You just tend the stove and let them have their meal in peace. The wooden clapper sounds some time after the night deepens past the busy hours. The night market stalls have mostly folded up. The Imperial street is quieter now. You can hear individual footsteps again rather than the blur of a crowd. The snow has been falling on and off since dark, and the wind has been consistent, pressing against the felt curtain in steady pulses, making it bulge inward and then release. The charcoal in the brazier needs tending every hour or so. The broth is holding well. You have sent your young helper to rest in the back room. He has been on his feet since early afternoon and will need to be up again before dawn. You told him to sleep for an hour or two, and he went without argument, rubbing his eyes as he pushed through the back door. Your wife is still with you, sitting at the work table, adding to the growing row of finished wontons on the bamboo trays with the methodical patience of long practice. The two of you work in comfortable silence. Then the curtain lifts and Joe comes in. Old Joe, or not so old, really, but the job ages a man. He works the night patrol for this part of the ward, walking his circuit through the lanes and along the avenue, checking doorways, watching for fire and trouble, marking the hours with his wooden clapper. He does this every night, in all weather. His dark patrol coat is dusted with snow on the shoulders and across the top of his cap, and when he pulls back the curtain, a pocket of cold air comes in with him, like something alive. His eyebrows have a faint white rime on them from the cold. His hands, when he settles into the seat closest to the stove, are the red of someone who has been outside for a long time. He sits down heavily and holds his hands out toward the warmth of the stove without speaking. He breathes out slowly a long, visible breath that disperses in the warm air of the shop. Then he looks up and holds up 2 fingers and points at the pork filling. You have already started counting. He calls out as you work. Snow's not heavy tonight, but the wind cuts right through you. Doesn't matter what you wear. That wind gets in. You listen and do not argue. You have heard various versions of this observation from Joe on most of the cold nights over the past 7 or 8 years. And you know it is not a complaint. Exactly, it is more like testimony. The need to say aloud what the body has been enduring for hours without anyone to tell it to. The wontons go into the boiling water. You add a generous amount of finely minced ginger to each bowl, more than you give most customers, because you know Joe needs it, and fill the broth almost to the rim. 2 large bowls. You carry them both at once and set them in front of him. He picks up the spoon and takes a long, slow sip of broth before he does anything else. You can see it move through him, the warmth spreading down from his throat, loosening something in his chest and his shoulders. He closes his eyes for just a moment. Still the best, he says. Nowhere else in this whole street does it like you do. He bends over his bowls and eats without lifting his head much, steady and concentrated, the way a person eats when they genuinely need the food. Both bowls are emptied completely, every wonton gone, every drop of broth consumed, the bowls tilted at the end to make sure nothing is left. He reaches into his coat and produces the coins. He has them ready, always, and places them on the table with the flat click of someone who has done this many hundreds of times. He stands, adjusts his coat, picks up the small lantern he carries on patrol, and shoulders the wooden clapper. Back to it, he says. Another few circuits yet. You nod. He goes out into the cold. Within moments, from somewhere down the avenue, you hear the clapper begin its rhythm hollow, steady, carrying across the empty street. The night is deep. Keep your doors well. The sound fades away to the east and then disappears into the wind. The city sleeps. You can feel it in the texture of the silence outside, heavier now, more complete. The last vendors left the street an hour ago. The lights in most of the shops along the avenue have been taken in. There are no more voices, no more wheels, no cartwheels on stone. Occasionally the clapper sounds Joe passing on another circuit, and then it fades again, and the quiet settles back down even deeper than before. In your shop, the broth pot breathes its steady steam into the ceiling. The charcoal shifts occasionally with a faint hiss, sending a thin curl of new smoke upward. The snow still falls outside, brushing against the felt curtain with a sound like fine sand against cloth, a sound you have heard on winter nights in this shop for 30 years. So familiar it has become a kind of company. Your wife sits beside you at the work table. You work together on the wontons for the early morning. 1 piece of dough, a pinch of filling, 1 fold, 1 pinch. Set it down, take the next. Neither of you speaks. The work itself is a kind of conversation, a rhythm between 2 people who have shared a lifetime of identical evenings like this one. 2 night patrolmen come in sometime deep in the night, just as Joe did, but louder and more thoroughly chilled than he was. They wear their dark uniform coats and carry small patrol lanterns, and their faces are vivid red from the cold ears. Cheeks, the tips of their noses, all the same urgent scarlet. They sit down heavily at a table, and one of them calls out immediately, 4 bowls of pork wontons, lots of ginger, lots of broth. As fast as you can, we're frozen solid. You count out 80 wontons without hesitation, drop them into the boiling water, and work quickly. 4 large bowls, each one full to the top, ginger scattered generously over the broth, steam rising in thick columns. You bring all 4 at once, 2 in each hand, and set them on the table. They eat without ceremony, bending over the bowls with both hands around them, pulling the warmth in from the outside and filling themselves from the inside. By the time the first 2 bowls are empty, their faces have shifted from scarlet to a more ordinary pink, and their breathing has slowed. By the time all 4 are gone, they are talking again. They leave their coins in a quick stack on the table, say something about coming back again, and push back out into the cold with something close to energy in their step, the temporary restoration that a genuinely warming meal can produce in the middle of a cold night. You wash the bowls in hot water, stack them back on the bamboo drying rack, and return to the work table. Not long after that, the curtain opens quietly. The young scholar who comes in carries a book, as he always does, a worn scroll tucked under one arm, the edges of the pages soft from handling. He lives at a small inn in the alley behind the street. He is from somewhere in the provinces, here in Linnan, to sit the provincial examinations in the spring, and he studies through most of the night. He has been coming here at roughly the same late hour for weeks now. Always quiet, always the same seat, the small table in the corner, slightly separated from the rest of the room, where the light is dim and the sound from the street is least. He sits down and places his book on the table beside the space where the bowl will go. He looks up and holds up one finger, then points to the bamboo shoot and pork filling, and makes a small gesturing motion, a slight reduction of something that you have come to understand as less salt, less ginger, no pepper. He eats lightly. He always has. You prepare his bowl with care. A clean, mild broth, very light seasoning, no pepper, the ginger measured to barely a suggestion. The bamboo shoot and pork wontons go in and come out at the right moment, 12 of them, 12, clean, smooth crescents in a pale, fragrant broth. You bring the bowl to his corner. He looks up and says, very softly, "Thank you." It is the first time anyone has spoken directly to you in hours. The voice is slightly rough with tiredness, and with the kind of interior focus that comes from hours of reading the voice of a man who has been alone with his thoughts for a long time. He eats slowly, and between spoonfuls his eyes move to the scroll. His lips move almost imperceptibly, going over something, testing it against memory, the silent murmur of a student working through difficult text. He is very far from home tonight, in a strange city, in the deep cold of winter, preparing for an examination that could change the direction of his life. He is very far from home tonight, in a strange city, in the deep cold of winter, preparing for an examination that could change the direction of his life. Most young men would go home without having passed. A few would see their names on the list. You watch him for a moment, and the chances of success in any given year were very small. Thousands of young men came to Linan from all across the country every cycle, carrying their book chests and their years of study, sitting in cold rented rooms, eating simply, working through the night. Most of them would go home without having passed. A few would see their names on the list. You watch him for a moment, not intrusively, just in the way of a person who has spent 30 years observing people eating in a small room, and then you turn back to the stove. There is nothing you need to do. The shop is warm. The broth is ready. Whatever he needs to work out in his mind, the warmth and the food will help him do it a little better. He finishes, leaves his coins neatly on the table, gives a small bow in your direction, and slips quietly back out into the cold. The curtain swings once behind him and is still. The snow has stopped. At some point in the deep middle of the night, you cannot say exactly when the sound of snow against the curtain went silent, and when you check by lifting the edge of the curtain and looking out, the air is calm and dry and still. The clouds have pulled apart in places, and between them, stars show cold and far away, small, bright points above the dark bulk of the roof lines. The snow on the ground has a faint luminosity to it in the starlight, white against the darker gray of the stone street. You let the curtain fall back and return to the stove. Your wife has made tea. She sets a cup on the edge of the work table near you, the rough earthenware cup that has been yours for years, the one with the small chip at the rim, and takes one for herself and leans against the wall near the warmth of the stove. You pick up your cup and hold it without drinking for a moment, just standing close to the charcoal heat, letting the warmth work into your lower back and the backs of your thighs. 30 years of standing in this shop have settled into your body in the particular ways that long labor settles. Your lower back aches with a deep, chronic ache that worsens in cold weather, an ache that begins before you are fully awake in the morning and does not leave until you lie down at night. Your legs carry a heavier tiredness than they used to, and after a night like this one, The arches of your feet are tender, and your ankles feel thick. Your hands, even with the pig-fat salve your wife makes and applies every night, crack in the knuckles in deep winter, and the small splits along your fingertips sting when they meet cold water or rough dough. You rub them near the brazier when no one is looking, not because you think it will help much, but because it is something to do. You have never talked about this very much. The shop requires what it requires, and you give it what you give it. That is simply the shape of a life built around this kind of work. The neighbors say your wontons are the best in Linan, and perhaps they are right, but they do not see the 30 years of 5 in the morning risings, the 30 winters of cold hands on cold water, the slow accumulation in the joints, and the back of 10,000 long days standing at this table and this stove. You finish the tea. You set the cup down. Your wife is already back at the work table, filling in the bamboo trays with the last batch of wontons for the early morning wave. You go and stand beside her and begin to do the same. 1 piece of dough, a pinch of filling, 1 fold, 1 pinch. Set it down. The rows grow slowly and evenly, each wonton nestled against the next, round and smooth and sealed tight. You have done this so many times that you no longer think about the movement. Your hands know it entirely on their own. Some time before the first light, the distant bell tower tolls again. The sound is low and round, rolling across the rooftops and dissolving into the cold air. But almost immediately after it fades, other sounds begin faint at first, then growing. The creak of a cartwheel, the knock of a handcart, the high, rhythmic creak of a shoulder pole under load. Voices, still far away, but becoming distinct. The city is waking up. You go to the back room and tap on the door. Your young helper comes out still blinking, his hair pressed flat on one side, pulling his coat on as he walks. He goes immediately to the well in the back courtyard and throws cold water on his face, gasping at the shock of it. Then he is awake, and he moves to his tasks without being told, wiping down the tables, feeding charcoal into the brazier, pulling a fresh bucket of water and setting it to heat. Your wife adds to the trays with renewed speed. The pre-dawn preparation, having everything assembled and ready before the door fills with people, is itself a form of hospitality. The farmers and laborers who come at this hour have no time to wait. They need to eat and go. Sure enough, within minutes of the first street sounds, the felt curtain begins to move. Early travelers, pre-dawn market workers, the same kinds of people who came yesterday and the day before, and the day before that tired people, cold people, people who have been walking since before the light, who smell of night air and effort, who want nothing in the world right now more than something hot. You and your helper fall into the familiar rhythm. You at the stove, he taking the bowls to the tables and collecting the coins and wiping up after. Your wife replenishes the trays as fast as the wontons are used. The shop fills and empties and fills again, bowl after bowl, going out across the counter. The pot kept at a steady boil, the broth maintained clear and fragrant. And slowly, almost without your noticing it, the darkness outside the curtain begins to change. The quality of the cold shifts before the color does. The deep, static cold of the middle of the night, the kind that sits on everything without moving, begins to soften slightly at its edges. The air is still frigid, but there is something different in it, a faint suggestion of circulation, as if the atmosphere itself is beginning to stir in preparation for the sun. And then the horizon shows it, a pale, barely perceptible brightening along the eastern edge of the rooftops. Not color yet, just the first distinction between sky and dark. It spreads slowly, the darkness thinning from black to the deep blue-gray of pre-dawn, and then, in the space of a few minutes, the first true light arrives, a thin strip of pale gold that sits just above the roofline and begins to warm. By the time the sun has fully cleared the rooftops, the Imperial street is loud again. The morning market is in full swing. The vegetable sellers are at their stalls. The fish vendors are calling their prices in long, carrying tones. Buns and porridge are being sold from smoking baskets. The street fills with the voices and bodies of thousands of people, beginning another day in one of the great cities of the world in this century, a place that had long since forgotten what stillness felt like, a city that never truly slept, that moved, a city that never truly slept, that moved from one kind of busyness straight into the next, without a proper gap between them. The sun is fully up now. Its light catches the snow on the rooftops and throws it back bright and hard, the kind of winter brightness that makes you squint even from inside. The eaves drip in lines of slow, crystalline drops where the accumulated snow is beginning to melt in the warmth of the morning sun. The street below has been churned by hours of foot traffic into a mixture of packed snow and dark stone, and the sounds of the morning market carry cleanly through the cold, dry air voices and bells, and the rhythmic calls of vendors who have been at their posts since before you had your first cup of tea. The early morning rush through your shop rises and then crests and then, gradually, begins to thin. The last of the pre-dawn travelers have eaten and gone. The market workers who came in needing something hot before the day's long labor began have taken their warmth and their coins and disappeared into the crowd. The bamboo trays are nearly empty now. Most of what you and your wife assembled through the night has been used, and you feel the particular quality of tiredness that comes not from having done nothing, but from having done everything, steadily, over the course of a full night and day. Your wife appears at your elbow. She tells you, in the quiet, firm tone she has developed over 30 years of being married to someone who does not know when to stop, that you should go home. She and the boy can manage what is left. The morning crowd is thinning. There are perhaps a dozen customers still at the tables, but no new ones pushing through the curtain with urgent hunger. The stove is stable. The broth is good. Everything is in order. You wash your hands in the basin of warm water near the stove, working the flour and the cold out of your knuckles, running your thumbs along the cracked places on your fingertips. The water turns slightly cloudy with the last traces of the morning's work. You dry your hands on the cloth hanging from the work table edge and press them together for a moment near the warmth of the brazier. You tell your wife and the boy what needs watching, what will need replenishing, what time the second pot of broth should be started for the evening. You say it quietly and without fuss, not because the instructions are unimportant, but because you have said them so many times that they are half theirs already, carried in the same deep memory that carries all of this. They nod. The boy is already wiping down the tables. You take your outer coat from the hook near the back door, shake the flour dust from the front of it, and put it on. You step through the low side door of the shop into the cold morning air. Outside, the world is clean and bright and very cold. The snow that fell through the night lies in undisturbed white on the tops of the low boundary walls and along the ridge lines of the roofs, and in the narrow shadow strips at the base of the buildings where the sun has not yet reached. In the center of the lane, it has been compressed and broken by foot traffic into a pale, roughened path that crunches under your boots with each step, a sound that is oddly satisfying in the still morning air, the dry squeak and press of cold-packed snow giving way. You walk slowly, not because you are reluctant to go home, but because the body that has been standing and working all night simply cannot go any other speed right now. Your legs move carefully, deliberately, feeling the slight unevenness of the lane beneath the snow. Your lower back aches in its familiar way, the deep, settled ache of a man who has stood at a stove and a work table for more hours than he can easily count. You let the ache be what it is. You have long since stopped expecting it to leave. The sun is low still, but it is fully present, and it falls on your left shoulder and the left side of your face as you turn into the lane behind the shop. It is a winter sun, not warm enough to do very much, but warm in the way that all sunlight is warm, which is to say that where it touches you, you feel it, and it is something rather than nothing. The cold is still real, but the sun is real too. The lane is coming alive in the particular way of a residential alley in midwinter morning. Doors are opening. The smell of something cooking drifts out from behind a wall, a thin, savory steam that might be congee, or a simple broth heating up for a household's morning meal. A dog barks somewhere and is answered briefly by another farther away, and then silence returns. A small child is sitting on a doorstep, bundled so thoroughly in padded clothing that only his face is visible, watching you pass with the uncomplicated attention of a person who has nowhere to be. You raise a hand as you pass. He watches you with round, serious eyes. You pass the house of the family who have been your neighbors for as long as you can remember. Their front gate is open, and you can hear voices inside the low exchange of a household waking up together, the sound of water being poured, the creak of furniture. An ordinary morning in a house full of ordinary life, and it is one of the most calming sounds in the world when you are tired and walking home through the cold. Your home is at the end of the lane, set slightly back from the path. From outside the gate, you can already smell it, the particular warm smell of your own kitchen, of the stove that has been burning since before dawn, of the congee that your wife put on the pot before she came to help at the shop, and which has been sitting on the low fire all night, thickening and deepening, so that by the time you arrive home, it is the right kind of dense and soft, the kind that does not need chewing, that gives itself over completely to exhaustion and warmth. You push the gate open, You take off your coat in the entrance and hang it up. You pull off your boots. The floor under your feet is cool, but not cold. The smell of the congee is stronger now, coming from behind the inner door. You press your palm flat against the inner wall for a moment, an old habit, something you started doing years ago without quite knowing why. Just the simple reassurance of your own wall, your own home, solid and warm. After a long night, the bowl of congee is waiting on the table. It is thick and pale and still steaming, the surface broken by the slow, lazy bubble of something that has been kept just below a boil for many hours. Beside it is a small dish of pickled vegetables, sour and clean-tasting, the kind of thing that cuts through the tiredness in the mouth, and a pair of chopsticks and a ceramic spoon. You sit down. The first spoonful is warm all the way down. The second is warmer. By the fourth or fifth, the tightness in your chest from the night's cold has eased, and you can feel the heat spreading outward from your stomach into the slow, fatigue-heavy muscles of your back and arms. You eat without hurry. You have nowhere to be for the next several hours. That simple fact, nowhere to be, is one of the quietly profound pleasures of the day, available only after the long night is finished and the shop is in other hands. You finish the congee. You wash the bowl. You move to the inner room. The bedding has been warmed. Your wife, before she left this morning, placed a stone bed warmer wrapped in cloth beneath the covers, and the warmth has spread through the quilted layers so that when you press your hand into the bedding, it is like pressing it into something that has been storing heat patiently all morning, waiting for you. You sit on the edge of the bed for a moment and rub your feet with your palms, working the stiffness out of the arches and the ache from the ankles. Then you lie down. The weight of the night settles around you all at once. The sound of the lane outside is very faint from here, distant voices, the occasional cart, the ambient murmur of a neighborhood in the middle of its morning. The light through the paper window is soft and indirect, the winter sun just bright enough to fill the room with a pale, diffuse glow that is entirely without harshness. You close your eyes. You will sleep until the afternoon. Then you will rise, eat something light, and return to the shop. The evening crowd will come again, the craftsmen and the neighbors and the students and the patrolmen. The broth will be simmering. The dough will be rested. The bamboo trays will be lined in their careful rows. The felt curtain will hold back the cold, and the first customer of the evening will lift it, and a gust of midwinter air will come in with them, and you will look up from the work table. 30 years of this. From the 13-year-old standing on a stool beside his father's hands, watching the fold and the pinch, to the man with silver at his temples and calluses worn into every joint. 30 years of rising before the city wakes. 30 years of the black clay pot and the clear broth and the careful separation of fat and lean. 30 years of the elm work table, its surface worn to a deep, familiar shine by the daily pressure of flower and palm and bamboo. 30 years of felt curtains lifting in the cold, of faces red from the wind, of hands wrapped around bowls, of copper coins set down quietly on the table. You never did anything remarkable by the city's measure. You did not sit the provincial examinations or win a place on any list. You did not build a grand household or accumulate the kind of wealth that gets spoken of at banquets. What you built is smaller than that and more durable. A shop that people trusted, a craft that people came back to, a small room of warmth that stayed open through every cold night of every winter, where anyone who needed it could come in out of the dark and be fed. The farmers who walk half the night to reach the market, the porters who carry more than their share, the students far from home, working through texts in cold rented rooms, the patrolmen walking their circuits in the snow, the young mother wiping soup from her child's face, the cloth merchant sitting in his regular seat with his vegetarian bowl, the exam student with his scroll, his lips moving in the lamplight. All of them came. All of them ate. All of them left a little warmer than they arrived. That, in the end, is the whole of it. One bowl at a time. One winter at a time. One long night at a time. The light through the paper window drifts and softens as a cloud passes over the sun outside. The room is warm. The city goes on with its morning beyond the walls. The sound of the lane fades. Your breathing slows. Sleep now. Dream gently. Rest in quiet peace. When this story ends, another quiet room in the old world will be waiting.